Hey, alrighty, changing it up a bit, totally different time of day, super early hours of the morning, if you will. Cat's got my chair, and yeah, it's forcing me out of my comfort zone, because I'm so comfortable in front of a camera. That's why I do this. I just want to be in front of a camera. It doesn't matter what I've got to say. I just want to be here with you, and I feel, it's easy just hitting a record button. Hey, we all got devices that can do it. Why shouldn't we do more of it, This is what you want, isn't it? You just want to consume somebody else's life and not have to focus or face your own. I bet you're skipping this video pretty quick. Oh yeah, well, those fears and thoughts in your life, man, I've got them on the periphery of your thinking, and I'm going to bring them in. Yeah, have you paid your bills yet? Yeah. Okay, so what are we here to talk about? Let's make a topic. In fact, I'll make the topic. What have we got? Nintendo or Sony? Either or, because the competitors are the ones you're going to worry about. Okay, so sometimes the best way to explain why you should get something, these guys, is to explain why you shouldn't get something else. And so these guys, even if they didn't know, even if they were the worst consoles on the market by hardware or by service channel in terms of, does the hardware break? Maybe that might be a good one. We kind of want reliable equipment. For whatever reasons, these guys are your only options, right? So we've all heard about the other player. In fact, if you're watching this, it's probably because you're in the camp of the other player. Man, these people get angry when you tell them the bad news. And so today I'm going to be the messenger, and I'm going to give you the bad news about Xbox. Okay, so where to begin? Oh, look, it's a lot of bad news. Okay, be ready for this. Do I have to talk quickly? You console gamers, you like your pace, and I've got to do the fast cuts, and I'm going to come in, and yeah. Look, there's none of that. This is going to be a lot of facts. Facts. Some of you guys will just be wanting to deny them. Go, nah, it's just opinion. Just opinion. Okay. Well, let's hear somebody else's opinion and maybe get schooled. Microsoft. Why did they enter the console market? Well, it's a business. Fantastic. If you look at the value of gaming versus, say, movies or TV, gaming as a market has just climbed and climbed and climbed. So when there's a lot of money in a particular market segment, it's the job of business people to find said ways to tap into said markets, and that's what Microsoft did. They started quite arguably unethically right from the get-go, and the way you start out quite often is a measure of how you'll go on. Heck, my video is a pretty good indication of that. So what they do, they bought up a competitor. So right when the market really mattered, Sony existed, and Sony existed possibly because of a deal that fell through with Nintendo years before that, where they built a CD-ROM type based computer, and it was for one of the big gaming companies on the planet at the time. We had three. We had Sega, which here in Australia we always called Sega, and then Sonic the Hedgehog came out in '93 or something. Put the cartridge in, and there was a digital soundbite in it, and it went Sega. And all of a sudden we were like, what was that? Okay, so we had Sega. We didn't even know we had Sega. We thought we had Sega. We had Nintendo, and we had Sega and Nintendo. I mean, we had Atari before that. Yeah, we had Sega and Nintendo. I mean, people like myself, I'd import consoles, so I had TurboGrafx or SuperGrafx or other consoles. I had Neo Geo, played all the handheld consoles and stuff. But coming along the way, what do we have? I'm sure there was another market player. Anyway, Nintendo trying to get the one up. Sega were going down the CD path, and so we had a Mega CD, and we had all these other coming out of the computer kind of environment, and this fold down, trickle down CD technology. So a lot of people came to the market with CD technology when it did hit. And Philips had the CDI platform, and I think at the last minute, the 11th hour, if you will, Nintendo kind of dropped this platform that Sony, as an electronics company, had built for them. This concept, at least. I don't know how finished it was. It was early in the 90s at this point. And Nintendo just went, no, we're going to go with them instead. I can imagine Sony were a little bit miffed. And they'd already done the research and development. You know, and so Nintendo overnight created competition. And the PlayStation was born. Anyway, after the PlayStation was born, and there were steps involved with that, and it comes about stealing software companies. It was a pretty low blow fell move, and so this argument kind of goes both ways. Did Final Fantasy VII, when they were making it, did they want CD-ROM technology? Would they have been happy writing for cartridge-based technology? And my understanding is it was Nintendo, with their family values, that had rejected a scene with the main character Cloud needing to go into a particular area building in the game and having to change clothing, and essentially Nintendo referred to that as cross-dressing, and wanted the Square Enix, Square at the time, to consider changing up their software. And I think they just went, look, you know what, we'll just, this guy's over here, Sony, are quite willing to have us, and they've got CD-ROM, and you know, history was born, and one of the early players in Sony's coming to market that did them really well certainly was Final Fantasy VII, and the game was optimised. We're talking here hardware platform, 2 meg of RAM, 33 megahertz processor, essentially, not much else going on. And if you ever played Final Fantasy VII, like literally it went from full motion video cutscenes, something that on cartridges you'd never seen up to this point, and it just went straight into the game where you were playing and moving your character, and no loading essentially. And they'd been loading in the background, and if you listen to the drive you could actually hear it very, very cleverly, moving a lot of data, getting ready for this in their 2 megabytes of RAM. And so, look, you know, quite often, look, we can definitely agree that it was the software that made a platform, and that's always been the rule. You know, if you build a platform, people will generally come to it. But it's the software that you've got on it that justifies whether you stay around in the market. And we can say that doesn't really make sense for why Sega exited the market. They had all these AAA games. When they put the Dreamcast out, and it is one of the ultimate consoles in all-time history, it was like the perfect platform, and it had all the AAA games, basically every single title they put out and launched. They had just about one of every type of genre, and it was really good. But I think they got hacked too early. You could literally put a boot disc in and then just put your game in. You didn't even have to put a mod chip in, and that's killed platforms. You know, I think the same thing happened to PlayStation Portable. And if your developers aren't going to get money, they leave platforms. Okay, why do I mention this? Well, it's going to be relevant in just a moment. So Microsoft had a competitor. They were in the software side of things at the time in PC space, and games like Doom were out there, and everyone attributes Doom and Wolfenstein before it as the first sort of corridor-based 3D shooters, and you know, Quake and Doom more so. And it wasn't necessarily true over on the Apple platform. And Apple didn't really have, you know, at this stage of the game, nobody really had 3D accelerated video cards, but these incredible developers in the form of Bungie, and they were making these games called Marathon, and arguably I think Marathon had the rocket jump even before Doom might have had the rocket jump, but we all know our own personal histories, and it's fair to say that not a lot of people were gaming on Mac, so not a lot of people know about Marathon or Marathon 2, and anyway, Bungie's new product was going to be a little thing called Halo, and at the time I was a PC gamer, and the screenshots of what Halo was going to be, it was going to come to PC. And Microsoft wanted to enter the gaming market, and so Sega are kind of on their way out, and all this stuff's happening. But they come to market with the Xbox. The Xbox, it was just standard PC architecture. There was nothing special about it. It was so fucking standard PC architecture. Sorry to swear. This video is not for kids. It's gaming. I'm going to talk about candy. It's not for kids. They came to market with this standard PC, and it was so standard that it had essentially 2 USB ports, but they didn't want to be seen as a standard PC, and so they changed the shape of the USB port so you physically couldn't recognise it as a computer. But inside of it, it was basically a computer. But they're not a great design team. Essentially, every single PC motherboard since the dawn of time basically had 2 IDE channels, and an IDE channel was what you put your drives on, and you can move data up and down either of them, and they stripped one of the IDE channels out of the Xbox system, and it basically meant they had a CD-ROM system, and they had a hard drive, because of the way they literally saved, I don't know how much they saved, far out, I hope they saved a lot of money. They essentially made it so that developers would only be able to use the CD-ROM drive or the hard drive. They wouldn't be able to use both. And in the PC space, man, the gamers, they would have been like, wow, look at this! You can have full motion video on the TV in your game world because you can stream the huge amounts of storage that's on a CD-ROM. You can stream, the full motion video, and we'd be able to actually do something with it. But I mean, the Xbox designs out the gate were really bad. Essentially, but they had genius stuff going for them. They had and the Enforce chipset was fantastic, and it had a Dolby encoder in the sound chip, and that for everybody was so worthwhile because we were transitioning. We had Dolby Surround, which would work off your left and rights. Your video tapes could give you Dolby Surround, and it's a matrix encoder. It's like left channel, right channel. The center is left plus right. The rear is left minus right, and it's frequency limited. And Dolby Digital was like, you can have full frequency response to your rears, and therefore you can have proper panning, and you can literally have sound just purely coming from your rear right speaker. So Enforce was great, but this is the start of what happens when you've got a really anti-consumer company who's just determined to make money and rip and hurt everybody else's players. They deprecated the sound chipset in Windows PCs. At this time, we all had great gaming sound cards, and heaven forbid a computer would ever be allowed to do what an Xbox could do. And even though the Xbox was 700 megahertz, I think they overclocked them at the last minute, maybe 733. Standard things come into market. Let's play the numbers game. Let's convince consumers it's all that. It was a great console. Don't get me wrong. I had one and loved playing Halo, which was this software made by Bungie that had now been pulled from the PC platform and put magically in the console ecosystem. And so they had a big title, and that big title probably did them wonderfully well. So spinning on, Xbox 360. A lot of red ring of death on that one. It sort of looks like in an attempt to come to market early, maybe they didn't have their hardware spot on, but Microsoft has deep pockets, and just like they did with the first Xbox, where they were willing to lose money to put these things in your house, they were buying their way into the market, and it worked for them. They might have had a time constraint on them, and so maybe they wanted to beat the competitor. I don't know. I'm not going to go into any research for this. I'm just telling you how I lived through it. People are going to tell me off. No. Look, they beat PS3 to market, and it was a better console, and they were only better than PS3 because of market shortages and chips at the time. And the PlayStation 3 at the last bloody minute, they couldn't put the two highly powerful cell processors in them, and Therefore, at the last minute, they basically were coming to market with half as much as what they thought they had, and they were going to use a cell processor, one for graphics, one for actual CPU needs, AI and whatnot. And all of a sudden, they're like, we'll have to use one cell processor, and they hoodwinked basically a very low-powered video chip. And if you were ever going to be a fanboy to one ecosystem or the other, you had probably legitimate reasons to sort of look at a lot of titles that were on the PlayStation, go, they're not as good. And it required a lot of programming excellence to make that platform shine. So look, in terms of the war at that time, it could go either which way, and the software generally made things happen. And so one of the great games that came out, a real crown jewel, would have been Elder Scrolls, Oblivion at the time, which was a PC game, amazing graphics, but the fact that it could run on a console and run quite well, and it was a role-playing game that typically are never in launch windows because of the development time. It was on a console in a reasonably early time in the console's life. And so yeah, look, it was revolutionary. But the console itself, the hardware might have been running a bit too quick, maybe than what it could handle. Thermally didn't really handle itself. Red rings of death, that Microsoft didn't mind an exchange rate. I don't know if it was 1 in 3, but us gamers generally had a bit of difficulty with those consoles. But standard PC architecture, nothing special. Very, very easy to do backwards compatibility when your architecture's the same every single time around. Whereas Sony kept making these supercomputer chips. They were supercomputers. You couldn't sell them into some markets because there's some. Or that could be used for missile guidance systems. Like that's too cheap for that much power, and it's so lightweight and portable, just about. So yeah, Sony kept making these custom engineered parts that were supercomputers, and you can't do backwards compatibility of your last part if it was a supercomputer. You need to have a supercomputer and then some in order to actually. An emulator needs a lot of math. You've got to emulate the chips that are in the other platform. So it's fair to say once we moved from that era into the next era, one of the crown jewels this time in Microsoft's pocket, if you will, or possibly crown, I'd like to think, was backwards compatibility. And so people say it's always been a thing that Microsoft champions end users. Okay, get your facts right. They do it because it's something that works for them, and if the market didn't give them any benefit whatsoever by doing that, they would not do it at all. Oh, no, because there's a chance to sell you those old games again. But Sony have always wanted to do backwards compatibility. You know, we're going to see with the PlayStation 5 generation that they've now got enough CPU power. The PS4, the CPU in the generation that came after Xbox 360, PS3, both companies coming to market basically use standard PC architecture. First time ever on the PlayStation side of the coin, and it did them wonders. You know, both companies said going forward, this is the way. Like, it's just, we can actually return money. You know, the research and development time is a lot better. But having a standard platform that's also used in the PC space means porting things is very, very easy. So it worked, and it had always been working for Microsoft's side of the coin, but Sony found great success in doing so. Much cheaper console, arguably, in terms of development, bringing it to market. And so all of a sudden we had just about identical platforms. Not quite. The PlayStation effectively was about 40% more power from the video chip. The video chip's what matters the most when you want nice graphics, and they'd spent more. You know, they bought a better video chip. And it was sort of like the equivalence. If Microsoft had spent about $40 on the video chip, Sony had spent like $150 practically on the video chip part. And that 40% speed difference was substantial. So in a lot of early titles, this time around we were seeing that the developers could write basically equally for both platforms. One wasn't tricky to program for, having paltry little bits of RAM and whatnot, and a really hard CPU to use. So yeah, the multi-platform titles were very much a lot more equal this time around than they were the generation before. And in those early titles we saw 20% faster performance, that is 20% faster frame rate at generally 20% higher resolution. You know, that's 40%. It translated to actual really real numbers, real frame rates differences. And so we could see that, oh yeah, on paper spec differences made a difference. But it wasn't the whole story necessarily, and that generation very much went in Sony's favour for a range of reasons. Microsoft make the silly mistake of replacing their hardware, going, oh look, we're a bit less to market, and they burnt the developers in the process. They pulled out Kinect, which they promised all the developers, you're going to have Kinect. We're going to build it with the hardware, we're going to sell it in the box. You know, if it comes with every console, you can write for it as features in every game, because every game will have access to that hardware. But in order to get a 10% CPU advantage by not having to do bone mapping, they pulled the Kinect out. And they did what they could, but they basically had to come to market with the Xbox S, Xbox One S. And that's the console we all refer to now when we refer to Xbox One. You know, Microsoft want to forget about the model before it, but it is another SKU. There's a speed difference between the two, and the Xbox S closed the gap down between PlayStation 4 and Xbox. And Sony, sadly, had a little thing called VR that they've been working on for so long, and what everyone found out when they were building VR is that the requirements of doing VR is actually so intense that you needed about high frame rate, like 90 frames a second. If people weren't going to get motion sick when they moved their head, and the world speed in their game didn't catch up as quickly as they moved their head. And Sony already had the PlayStation 4, you know, and it's like, well, we need to do VR. We've been working on it, and they had to do a hardware bump. Had to, didn't have a choice. PS4 Pro was born, and it was built just purely and simply for VR, to be at a minimal level that people kind of really needed if they were going to do VR right. But being consumer friendly, they insisted that games be written for the PS4 and that no extra features be found in the PS4 Pro version other than maybe the benefit of the extra speed, you know. It's quite an ethical thing, but it was about a 40% speed bump. What was it, 40%? Yeah, it was a significant speed bump anyway over the existing platform. But Microsoft saw that as a call to arms, going, cool, if they're going to release a new platform so early into a console life, we'll do that too. And they knew the number difference that it cost them, the war at the early stage of the game. And we didn't really have video game wars up until now. Okay, we've always talked about there's always been video game wars, Sega, Nintendo, whatever, but the war started happening, right? These were the early stages of the setup to the current war. And there is a current war going on. This is why I do this video. So educate the consumer, please. Support consumer ethical businesses that are actually going to support you in the long run and aren't just going to rip you off like a peanut. And I say this because if the video cuts out, this is the meat and potatoes of my message. So yeah, the PS4 Pro having come out, Microsoft went, well, we'll tell you what, 40% speed difference made all the consumers that absolutely loved us, you know, they loved the games in our ecosystem and whatnot, they all jumped ship over to PlayStation because the titles were a little bit faster running, and you know, the fishes were easily drawn over into one ecosystem or the other, and a lot of people jumped ship to Sony in this generation of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in the early days. because of the hardware capabilities. And so Microsoft went, well, tell you what, we're going to build a new super console and we're going to make it 40% more powerful, because that was enough to switch everybody over to that camp initially. Maybe that's the magic number. We'll make it 40% more powerful. And in the PC space, people buy for 10 or 20% more power every year and a half or so, ridiculous amounts of money. Basically every 2 years, ridiculous amounts of money to get tiny little improvements. So 40% was huge. And nobody was writing for it. The market was owned by Sony. All the developers would write for PS4, what the lion's share of the consumers were, and maybe make an enhanced version of the software for PS4 Pro. And because of that, when porting their games to the other systems, right, a deprecated version of the PS4 version went to the Xbox One family, S and 1, and the version for the PS4 Pro was generally not worked on for the Xbox One X. Maybe because of the numbers that were sold, whatever reasons. So Microsoft were getting really annoyed. They were looking, why is nobody writing software for our hardware? Everyone's saying the games don't look enhanced enough on our new platform, and people can't see it for how much more powerful it is. And their attitude when they brought this thing to market was, this is our platform going forward. This is what we're going to do, is we're going to just release new hardware more and more often. And if you're just putting out standard PC parts, that's easy to do. Standard PC parts are constantly improving, and it's just easy to rotate one in, and you actually probably do it for the right reasons, because whatever, due to scales of production, whatever's manufactured the most is probably the cheapest to implement, and you don't want to be stuck with old outdated stuff that isn't necessarily able to be reduced in cost to be manufactured and whatnot. So you kind of want to upgrade your platform, and the promise they made to consumers is, what we're going to do is the Xbox One X is the new super platform, and in time it will become the base platform, and we'll deprecate that. The Xbox One will sort of drop from market, the Xbox One S will drop from market, the Xbox One X will be the baseline platform. And that was like a promise. And people have short memories, because I tell you, that platform got buried. But with to get developers to actually make software look good on the Xbox One X, after years of closing down studios, Microsoft did a complete about-face and started buying them up again, so that somebody would be writing some software that would actually show the console off as something better than a PS4 Pro, which was less than an Xbox One X. But a PS4 Pro had a legitimate reason to exist, and consoles support customers by having long lifetimes, right? It's when the console's been around for a while, the developers have not only put out one game, they put out a second game, they put out a third game, and it's improved. And go back to the example of Bungie. Halo 2, when they put the advertising spiel out for that, they said, oh, if you thought Halo was good, this is like, this is not verbatim, but they said this is like an ambulance doing like 140 mile an hour through like a school zone or a hospital zone or something, like a slow speed zone. So that's the imagery of something incredible, like, oh, there's action going on there, and they said, like, the siren's blaring, it's all, and they said, but it's not just going really fast, it's on fire, and it's being attacked by ninjas, and the ninjas are on fire. It was pretty good imagery, you thought, oh wow, Halo 2 is a big step up, and the reason that was, and it's what we'd seen all through console generations, is that when you get to learn said platform, you can squeeze every last little nuance out of the hardware you've got, and you can actually make second generation or second wave of software titles that come to market look so much better than the first wave. This is historically true. It's been happening for decades. Okay, this isn't new to the current paradigm, and this isn't the war. It's the war that's about to play out. It's the reason why only one platform has a chance in hell of actually being a console. Consoles are this low cost of adoption to get cutting edge technology, and so console markets are great. As a PC gamer who had a couple of high-powered video cards and lots of tech, I've moved to the console ecosystem because, and this is about the ethics, is that in order to sell an Xbox One as a powerful console, Microsoft deprecated the world's production platform, Windows PCs, right? They started doing all this really unethical stuff with DirectX 12 and whatnot. And DirectX 12 wasn't not really relevant to this discussion, but it's the to-the-metal language that supports your AMD chip in these consoles, and it was written by AMD to give direct level access to their video chips, and it was going to remove DirectX from the market. And DirectX is the only reason why gamers are stuck in a Microsoft ecosystem when gaming on PC. You could game in Linux, but sans, because you don't have DirectX, you can't. They've got older versions of DirectX, but they haven't got DirectX 11, DirectX 12 or something, so they can't get the latest games. And it was creating this split in the market, and all of a sudden NVIDIA were going to write a to-the-metal language that people could write for, and then there was Glide, and was it Glide? Vulkan. No, Vulkan is essentially it. So Vulkan was essentially incorporated as a key part of what is DirectX. And so DirectX 12 actually had separate pathways. Basically, Microsoft just went, no, we can't give up the control of the ecosystem. So we'll make DirectX and we'll incorporate what AMD are doing. We'll make that the base of DirectX, but we'll have some separate NVIDIA extensions so they can have to-the-metal performance, and that's now DirectX 12. But they didn't ever support DirectX 12. The aspects of DirectX 12 that they actually supported, they then used to cripple the market. And that's things like, you can save all your textures as one big texture. And so they make the consoles have video RAM that was 1 gig more than whatever the PCs at the time were using. So they allocated 5 gig of RAM in the Xbox console, Xbox One, and the Xbox One X used 9 gig of RAM. And so PC video cards were 4 and 8. And by doing that, they could encrypt the textures. And Forza 3 is a great example. They'd encrypt the textures, and decryption or encryption is a CPU very intensive thing, and they put that on the primary core and basically make these super powerful computers just grind to a halt trying to do very, very basic stuff. And they basically make it so the games wouldn't really work well on PC, and you certainly didn't get performance commensurate with the price what your hardware could actually do. So yeah, the Xbox ecosystem, and it's pretty horrible, right? So the new consoles, they're same thing again. Standard PC architecture have come out, and standard stuff of consumers will buy faster spec speeds, and so the specs are very manipulated. They're standard PC architecture, not really much altered in them, and they've got mismatched buses and stuff. Unless you've got first-party developers who are literally writing exactly for the hardware that's in them, then they're not going to get the support that they need to really shine. And sadly, all the developers are in the Sony side of the coin, mostly because there's more than 100 million PS4s in the market. They own last gen, and it's very easy to bring your software from a PS4 over to a PS5, or jumping ship. What was I going to say? The PlayStation side of the coin is highly customized hardware and designed for gaming. Right, it's dramatically different. The RDNA inside of the PlayStation is not RDNA 2 full. You don't want that. RDNA full 2 is for PC use, and it does stuff that Hollywood might want, and it does other things like mining and stuff. And so if you take all that stuff out of the die, the chipset that you don't need, and then put in a lot of the chipset that gaming does need, and in this case it's called an LEZ color. It actually looks at the screen and goes, okay, you can see the front of my hand, draw that, but the triangles that are needed for the back of the hand, don't draw that. It gives them when AMD built RDNA 3, they found there was about a 50% speed bump by using this type of concept. It worked really well for them. And so basically, we look at the raw numbers, and the Sony console is about 10 teraflops, and the new Xbox console is about 12 teraflops. So you go, oh, that's 20% more powerful. Well, we know basic math. But it's misrepresented 12. It's created by using fake numbers in a system that most developers will never ever be able to squeeze out of it. Whereas the Sony side of the coin is like it just auto-optimizes itself. You can throw old gen software at it or whatever, and especially foliage, stuff that's going to be made up of a lot of triangles. If it doesn't have to send that information through the pipes on the console, it frees up about 40% of the bandwidth, or a huge amount. And so it's probably going to punch up generally about 40% more powerful than what the numbers indicate. So if anyone's good at math, 10 plus 40 is about 14. So if you have 14 teraflops versus 12, and these numbers aren't real, okay, I'm just giving you a rough indication of what the performance is likely to be consistently. Unless first-party developers write really specifically for the Xbox ecosystem, and the problem is that will never happen because there's so many SKUs, and so when they realised they lost the war, consumer interest had gone to the PS5, and I think they put out the Halo footage, no longer by Bungie, but the Halo footage was looking pretty bad, and people went, oh, okay, we're more interested in PlayStation. So Microsoft's instant response to that was they went to market players and went, can you build us, what's the cheapest thing you can build? We're just going to build the cheapest console, and that wins markets, so we'll do that. And but at the next die shrink, just build us something that the next die shrink will be super cheap. So there's an Xbox, what are we at, Series S, probably a revamp to that due in the next year or so, and it'll probably get a speed bump so the consumer interest in it's more interesting. But having so many SKUs to write for, so Xbox One, Xbox One S, Xbox One X, which has now been dropped, basically Xbox, all those are gone. They're not focusing on them anymore. They're focusing on the Series S and the Series X. And I think because the Series S sells twice, numbers 2 to 1 probably, versus the Series X, all the development we can see in the benchmarking, early benchmarking, pre-release games, that they're focusing on the Series S. Maybe because it's got less power and it needs a bit more tweaking. But there's not going to be very many optimised games in a Microsoft ecosystem, and this Games Pass thing is going to just destroy